When he was already very old, the Bible says that David was warmed by the most beautiful young virgin in all the kingdom of Israel. The name of this young woman was Abishag. However, there is something mysterious about the nature of the relationship between David and Abishag. This is because the biblical text states that David and Abishag did not have relations, but later, after David's death, Abishag's name was involved in the plot that led to Solomon's order to kill his half-brother Adonijah, who wished to marry that young woman. And this has led scholars to debate what exactly was Abishag's role as David's companion. Could she have been some kind of nurse or caregiver for the aging king? Or was she a concubine or secondary wife who, in some way, did not have consummated relations with David? And furthermore, was Abishag the woman who won Solomon's heart and was mentioned in the Song of Songs? Or could she have been a concubine or secondary wife who somehow did not have consummated relations with David? Furthermore, it would have been Abishag, the woman who conquered Solomon and was mentioned in the book of Song of Solomon. And because of that, did the heir to David's throne find his half-brother's love for her intolerable? This is exactly what we'll be talking about from now on. So, watch this video until the end, and you'll understand everything the Bible says about who Abishag was. Young Shunammite who cared for King David in his old age. The story of Abishag is recorded in the first few chapters of the first book of Kings in the Old Testament. The meaning of the name Abishag is uncertain, but some scholars suggest that perhaps this name means something like, "My father is a wanderer." Although the Bible doesn't provide much information about who Abishag was, as mentioned, the young woman is involved in the context of Adonijah's death, one of King David's sons. Abishag is described in the Bible as a young virgin from the city of Shunem. The city of Shunem was about 26 kilometers southwest of the Sea of Galilee, near Mount Gilboa, in the territory of the tribe of Issachar. And due to the fact that the letters L and N seem to be swapped in some ancient materials, some commentators note that the designations Shunammite and Sulamite may be equivalent in the biblical text. And if this is correct, then both terms indicate a woman from Shunem. And for those who have already read the Song of Songs, you might now even be able to imagine where this discussion is headed. This is because, based on the possibility that Shunammite and Sulamite are equivalent terms, a few scholars suggest that Abishag may have been the Shulamite woman mentioned poetically in the Song of Solomon. However, there is no evidence whatsoever for this, and most interpreters consider this hypothesis absolutely unlikely. So the idea that Solomon fell in love with Abishag and that she was the anonymous and mysterious wife mentioned in the biblical book of the Song of Songs, it's nothing more than pure speculation. So, going back to what we know for sure, the biblical text also says that Abishag was a very beautiful woman. The Bible tells us that at the end of King David's life, he had a lot of trouble keeping warm. The servants wrapped him in many clothes, but still, he couldn't get warm. So, the king's servants sent out to look throughout the kingdom of Israel for a young maiden to be before the king. This young woman had to take care of David and warm him in her arms. The chosen young virgin was none other than Abishag, and she took care of King David and served him. In fact, Abishag was present when the queen mother, Bathsheba, reminded David about the oath made that Solomon would be his successor on the throne of Israel. Further on, the Bible says that after David's death, Adonijah, who was also a son of the king, spoke to Bathsheba so that she would intercede with Solomon for him to be given Abishag as his wife. The context of the request made by Adonijah was very turbulent. This is because, shortly before, there was a great conspiracy to make Adonijah the successor of David. But when Solomon was officially anointed as king in place of David, Adonijah asked for a pardon, fearing for his life, and Solomon let his half-brother live. However, later on, Adonijah decided to make the request for Abishag, and obviously, King Solomon interpreted this request as a trick from Adonijah. To take the throne of Israel, back then in the ancient East, marrying a woman who had belonged to a king's harem implied a claim to the throne. So, Solomon understood that Adonijah was directly challenging his authority as king of Israel by wanting to possess Abishag. So, he immediately ordered that Adonijah be killed, as we read in the first book of Kings chapter 2. And in light of this, the inevitable question is, was Abishag, or was she not David's wife? It's true that scholars discuss Abishag's real role alongside David. Some argue that Abishag was like a concubine or wife of David. Others argue that Abishag was just a companion of David, in the sense that she was the person responsible for taking care of the king in his final days, as a caretaker or nurse, without it meaning that she became David's wife. And in fact, this is a somewhat complicated discussion due to two factors. First of all, the Bible highlights regarding Abishag that King David did not know her. About this, the biblical text says, "And she was a young woman, exceedingly beautiful, and she took care of the king and served him, but the king did not know her." This expression, "did not know her," means that David did not possess Abishag. In other words, he did not have relations with her. This information can support the idea that inferring that Abishag became David's wife is not something indisputable. Therefore, it wouldn't be completely impossible to think that Abishag never belonged to the group of David's women. But on the other hand, secondly, the way Abishag was associated with Adonijah's death seems to indicate that, at least in the eyes of the kingdom of Israel, Abishag was indeed considered David's wife or concubine, even though they did not have relations. And why does this conclusion seem to be much more coherent? Abishag was indeed considered David's wife or concubine, even though they did not have relations. And why does this conclusion seem to be much more coherent? Well, because when Bathsheba spoke to Solomon about Adonijah's request to marry Abishag, Solomon's response to his mother was the following. "And why do you ask Abishag, the Shunammite, for Adonijah? Ask him for the kingdom too, because he is my brother. Greater to him, I say, and also to Abiathar the priest, and to Joab, the son of Zeruiah." And King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "So God do to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now, as the Lord lives, who confirmed me, and made me sit on the throne of David, my father, Adonijah will die today, just as it has been said." Notice that Adonijah's request to marry Abishag was received by Solomon as a direct threat to his place on the throne of Israel. Solomon's reaction can be explained because at that time, as already mentioned, when a man married a woman who had been part of a king's harem, this action was often interpreted as a claim to the throne. During Absalom's revolt, for example, the Bible says that he lay with David's women before all of Israel, in a clear demonstration of power and a claim to the throne of Jerusalem. So, this seems to have been Solomon's understanding when he saw Adonijah's request as an internal conspiracy against his reign. In other words, for him, allowing Adonijah to marry Abishag would mean giving up his kingdom in favor of his opponents. Solomon would hardly have had this kind of reaction if Abishag had simply been his father's nurse or caretaker. Therefore, considering all this, most scholars believe that Abishag enjoyed the status of David's wife or concubine before the kingdom of Israel, even though she never had relations with the king. Now, write in the comments if you already knew the story of Abishag in the Bible. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos here.